these are my latest estate sale finds that I have recently, and the video today is going to go over this old BB gun, which has clearly seen better days. I think they may have either stored it outside or left it in a garage, but it certainly had been sitting in some mud and some water because the steel had some pretty good pitting in it, and then the lever's completely locked up from rust. The trigger wouldn't budge. So the first thing I had to do was just purely scrape off all the excess grime. So rust, dirt, mud, all the buildup. Just simple wire brush, and then after that, once that was gone, put on some WD-40 to kind of break up a little bit of the rust and get these screws loose, which I couldn't get them going, and I was worried about stripping the head, so that's why, since it was locked up anyway, I went ahead and used pliers to get the nuts off rather than try to use the screwdriver on the other side. So 2 of them came off easily, and I didn't realize until editing that I did not lose the 3rd nut, which was great for me, but still kind of a bummer that I'm missing one of the nuts. Got the lever off, and then trigger came out with no problem, but this top screw, it wasn't going to budge for me no matter what. So I gave it some light tapping with the hammer, break up the rust, kept trying to wiggle it loose. Nothing happened, so I did have to break out the torch, and was careful not to burn the wood or screw anything up, but it finally broke loose after the fire and came out, got it apart. This spring is embedded in there, and I was not about to take it out because didn't trust my luck of trying to get it back together. So here you can see a little bit of the rust, and once that was done, I went ahead and focused just on the stock and started out with a razor knife to get off the big crusty pieces. And once that was done, I switched over to a card scraper. So the card scraper is great for getting off the veneer and a little bit finer data before you start getting sandpaper in there. I don't want to use the sandpaper right away because it'll gum up too quickly. So after this card scraper got off these big pieces that you can see, then I switched over to sandpaper and went from 120 grit right here, and then switched over to 220, and after that worked my way up to about 320. Didn't get too soft on it, but it left quite a pile, and most of this is really just dirt. I didn't sand away too much actual material. And then right where the metal meets the gun stock, you can tell there's the water had just kind of stained the wood over the years, and it really wasn't going to come out. So after that, you can tell I put on mineral spirits to give you an idea of what it's going to look like, and it's a lot of character, but it's just too much of sporadic and uneven coloring, and I didn't care for it. So after looking at it, let it dry, put some sanding sealer on there so that way when I did stain it, it would be a nice smooth coat as far as even colors. But I'm kind of upset with myself because after the sanding sealer, I did forget to sand one more light sanding on there, which is just one of those oops kind of bonehead mistakes. But anyway, not the end of the world. Put on a good thick coat of dark walnut stain here, let it sit for a couple of minutes, and after it sat, wiped off all the excess, and it turned out pretty well. I like that it's a good dark even color versus the kind of mix and calico design that I had left over after sanding away things. So simply decided to go with boiled linseed oil this time, which I ended up going about 3, maybe 4 coats. Kind of lost track after a while. And in between each coat, I just put them on pretty thin and light coats, and then would come back with each one and give it a really light rub down with some steel wool, just 4/0 steel wool, so the 4 zeros, and I get nothing hard at all. I didn't want to have any of the stain come off or get discolored. This is probably the 4th coat, 3rd coat, whichever one I did last, and let that sit for a couple of days. Which the good news is, here the storms came through this week, knocked out power, so I wasn't able to do anything I wanted, and that actually helped me from putting on this wax too early. So a couple of coats of wax, I'd wait an hour after each coat, wipe off the excess, and then put another one on there and let it sit while I started working on all the metal pieces. So the first thing I did was take each piece and get off the big pieces of rust. And you can see it came off pretty well and not too bad. The pitting that was on there actually left some character, so I didn't do anything to fill in any of the pitting or any little problems that I had. So after that, I decided to put them in vinegar, let them soak overnight, and it works really well to get the vinegar to get the rust out from the barrel. And after that, make sure that you rinse it because it will rust very, very quickly. And then just took a gun cleaning brush, which worked well, wiped off all the extra residue here. So each piece just took some acetone to make sure that all the oils and any leftover vinegar, water, any of that stuff is completely dried up. And once they're all set, I had never done this before, but I decided to not go back with paint or shiny metal. Instead, what I decided to do was the liquid cold bluing, which is really cool stuff. So after you get the acetone to take off all the oils, you just put on this cold blue, and it just has a chemical reaction, so all the pieces go from this kind of chrome silver look and just to kind of flat black. And it's even more fun to watch in a time lapse, so that way you can see the color change from the shiny silver to the black. So I ended up putting on, I think, 3 coats of this stuff as well. Wanted to get it darker each time. And a couple of things I did learn: you have to make sure that you rinse off the material after you put that stuff on there. If not, it does rust really quickly. So it's ironic how much water you have to use on metal to keep them from rusting. So here you can see the barrel ended up using pads versus the cotton swabs. And this is, I only filmed the first coat, didn't want to bore you guys with all 3 of them. But you can see when I get finished here, I would wipe each one down with steel wool after that, and then put on another coat. And this is what it looks like just after 1 coat. So going from that shiny metal to this kind of gunmetal black. And after the 3rd coat, or excuse me, each coat, I would actually put oil on to keep it from having that flash rust that would show up. Then after 3 coats of cold blue, it came out to this kind of color, which I like, and then ended up putting it together. Assembly was pretty good. I didn't lose any pieces, and it was a little tricky to get some of these nuts to cooperate with me, so that part I had to break out an old adjustable wrench to hold them in place, and during that process I did end up scratching the pieces that I had just blued, so that's kind of a bummer, but it's a really quick fix. All you have to do is break out the cold blue and a cotton swab yet again, put it on there. Any spots that you had scratched, they'll just turn black to match everything else. Again, make sure that you wipe off the excess, and then once you do, put more oil on there to keep it from looking scratched. So here we go at the finish. Completely different change, and considering what I started with, all the rust and just years of neglect, I think it came out really well. So it loads here from the end, put in several BBs, then headed out to the backyard with the young apprentice, and you'll see that video here in a second. So before and after, quite impressed myself and feel like it came out really nicely. So it's an old 1930s Daisy 500 shot BB gun. It certainly doesn't have power, but it'll shoot, but not enough power to scare anybody, or even the dog didn't flinch, so you know it's not too powerful. Thanks for watching.